Okay, cognition. Hello, everybody. So, first of all, I'd just like to thank HVN for the invite. I'll explain a little bit the process for that in just a moment, because it sort of introduces my talk. But I'd also like to thank you. I realize I'm the last science presenter, and I bless you for still being here. So I hope that something I say is going to be of interest to you. Essentially, HVN, I think, was sort of semi-aware that we were sort of quite semi-active in the sort of cognitive area of research at Plant and Food. And we recently published a manuscript that caught their attention, and I think it was on that basis that we were contacted. So I will talk about that particular publication, but not too much, because what we wanted to do was give you an insight into the approach that we're taking in terms of cognition at Plant and Food, and insights into the couple of different areas that we're sort of starting work on. So I guess I'm looking down there at my title. That wasn't the original title. That was the title that we sort of came to. And the word I want to emphasize in that title is the word cognitive fitness. So those are the words that we're using at Plant and Food to describe the type of work that we're doing in the sort of cognitive area. So what do we mean by cognitive fitness? And so essentially what we're talking about for us is mental or cognitive performance and cognitive well-being. So I've tried to sort of summarize key aspects of the approach we are taking in those areas. And so the things that we're interested in are concentration, alertness, reducing stress and anxiety, enhancing mood, and getting a good night's sleep. So those sort of factors all come together in a sense in terms of cognitive fitness. The other area that we're interested in is, and I'll talk a little bit about it later on, is cognition in terms of exercise performance and exercise recovery. And I guess one of the key things from the talk as well that I'd like to get across is that Plant Food is not interested in neurological disease. So we're not interested in treating or preventing disease at all. The graphic on there is a little bit wrong. We're about wellness. But obviously, in some ways, in addressing some of those issues, you do address some of the symptoms of neurological disease. So I wanted to do, before I show my next slide, I wanted to do just a little survey. So please bear with me. Could you put your hand up if you are worried about your cognitive well-being? Fair amount. Yeah, not too bad. Can I also ask, who's buying products? Are any of you buying products in that regard? Could you put your hand up if you are? That's interesting, isn't it? Much, much less. Yes. So I hate to say it, but I think that sort of, the interest represents the dynamic of the room, maybe the age level. And maybe as mostly scientists, we don't have enough money to buy any products. So just one quick slide. Really what I'm trying to emphasize, it is a major, major concern and a major interest to consumers, especially, I guess, as we get a little bit older. And I guess that's what John was referring to. And for Plant and Food, we get a lot of interest in this area, especially from various industries. The sort of demographic that we're sort of targeting really at Plant Food is I guess, the aging well, or the people as they get older, but also other approaches in terms of students studying for exams, people working hard in cultures that do actually work hard, such as Asia, etc. So it's much broader than just aging. But let's look at some of the stats on that slide. 85% of consumers are actually interested in this area. And that's what reflected in this room, actually, I'd guess. 32% actively buying. There certainly wasn't 32% in the room actively buying from what I could see. And similar sorts of things across the US and in China. And there's some stats there on a sort of a bit of a breakup on the different areas around that in terms of relaxation or alertness. And on the bottom there, there's some numbers around the size of those markets in different parts of the world. Pretty sizable. So I tried to think of a food exemplar that was active in this space, a natural plant plant-derived food. Obviously, being a plant food, that's where our sort of slant is. And this is what I came up with. You could probably, I'm not sure if it's correct, so I'd be interested in your views. I know you can think of many other foods, plant-derived sort of foods that are active in the brain, but they're not all linked to health, right? So there are some various natives, there's alcohol, caffeine. I wouldn't necessarily say they're sort of healthy. But from a healthy perspective, this is what I came up with, blueberries. And the picture there of that nice scientist there is Professor Jim Joseph, for those of you that might have known him. He's probably the #1 scientist across the world that has really lifted the emphasis around cognition and blueberries, especially in the US. Unfortunately, he passed a number of years ago, but one of his original postdocs, Dr. Barbara Schuckert-Hale, now sort of leads that area. So they are world leading in this space and published a lot of work. Most of the work has been around animal studies and around animal behavior, animal motor skills, and I guess cognitive decline with aging animals. But now there's work coming through around blueberries with human studies that is looking quite promising too. I just wanted to show the nice little cartoon there. Jim, I didn't really know him that well, so James, I should say, I guess, did a lot of teaching. He was very proud of his research as a nutritionist, and this is actually his drawings actually from a child that he interacted with, and you can see on the left, before blueberries, there's a consumer there with a small brain from a child's perspective, and on the right-hand side, a much bigger brain, which I thought was really cool. So what's our approach at Plant Food? Well, it's a little bit different. So, we're interested in whole foods. So we're not taking the pharmaceutical approach. So the pharmaceutical approach is like a single potent bioactive, a drug, with a single mechanism that it's targeting, and so you have a sort of single type activity. And I've just put Valium on there as an example in terms of anxiety. For foods, of course, we have to interact with the whole matrix unless we're taking out some of those ingredients. So from a plant perspective, from a fruit and vegetable perspective, there's potentially a number of actives that might be present in a particular fruit or vegetable. And so those actives could be acting quite synergistically or interacting with each other. In fact, we have a lot of evidence in that area. And so what we're talking about there is multiple actives with synergies potentially acting on multiple mechanisms, but with a single target. So it's quite different. And you notice that I've put down some receptors that are involved in neurotransmission. That is one of the areas of work that we're sort of looking at. So I just wanted to show you just one slide on that. So we've developed some receptor-based assay systems in which we can look at the binding of compounds or fruit varieties or plant varieties to those receptors that are involved in cognitive performance. So the data that's on there is just 2 graphs around some hop varieties. The bottom line sort of emphasizes where plant and food is at. I'm going to try and point, but this line here, these are numerous varieties of different types of hops from plant and food breeding programs. And what you can see there is their activity in terms of binding to the beta-2 adrenergic receptor in that case. So some are very active at binding, others less so. And that's one of the beauties from some of the breeding programs from plant and food. That's where some of the opportunities are for future foods. So we also do preclinical animal studies too. So just 2 examples of that, and probably sort of work that you've seen before in the scientific literature. On the left there, there's an approach that's commonly used to look at anxiety in animals. It's called the elevated cross maze. So it's a platform with a cross that we place an animal on. So the rat is placed in the middle of that cross maze. So 2 of those arms of that cross are open arms, and 2 are closed arms. You can just see that if you look carefully. And so the movement of the animal into those open or closed spaces tells you how the stress level of the animal. And we video capture the movement and determine the percentage of time spent in each of those arms. If you look at the figure on the bottom left there, that's from a publication that came out a couple of years ago, in which we compared a compound that's present in blueberries, actually present in a number of different fruits, but blueberries particular, p-coumaric acid. And as you can see there, compared to the known pharmaceutical diazepam, and we're looking at anxiety there, a reduction of anxiety, p-coumaric acid at different doses has some activity that's not too far from that pharmaceutical drug. So fruits do have activity. On the right, the top right, there's a schematic of another type of study that we sort of do sometimes, and it's looking at memory and spatial awareness in animals, rats or mice. That's called the Morris water maze, in which you place the animal in this large water bath, and there's a platform that the animal cannot see that's under the water. And the animal doesn't like the swimming, doesn't like being in the water, obviously, and swims around to try and to escape, and will ultimately find the platform. We use video capture to analyze the time that it takes that animal to find the platform that it can't see, and it's a learning experience. And that is based on the spatial awareness, the pattern of things that are in the room that it's present in. And the data that you can see on the bottom there is that learning process over a number of days. So as you can see, as the days progress, the time that it takes for the animals to find that platform reduces. So that's a measurement of memory and spatial awareness. And the line with the solid circles is animals that have consumed a certain fruit. And so what you can see there, they are constantly ahead of the animals that haven't consumed that fruit, or the placebo group. And actually what you can see is their memory and their spatial awareness has increased so that they actually get to that platform one day earlier in that sort of learning curve. So we also do human studies too. So I'm just going to show you one bit of a human study that we've published, and another that's quite preliminary at this stage. And I'm looking at the clock. So this is, I'll go quickly. So this is a human study that we undertook a little while back. We compared two different types of blackcurrant products. One is a powdered product that we provided as a juice, and the other is a juice that we manufactured ourselves from a particular variety. At the beginning of the study, we made some physiological measures, some baseline measures, and then we allowed a period of absorption that you can see there. It says treatment and absorption. And then these individuals went into a cognitive challenging sort of period, cognitive tasks. So over a 70-minute period, individuals did a number of different cognitive psychometric tests that were mathematically quite challenging, and I can describe those later if we have time. And it was targeted towards creating cognitive fatigue in these individuals. And then at the end of that period, we assessed their performance one more time. So this is a summary of the data. It's a little complex, I'm afraid to say, so I'll try and work you through it. So if you look at the bottom right figure, that's a visual analog scale of fatigue. So over those periods of those cognitive challenges, up to the 7th repetition, there's a reduction in fatigue that you can see there that's been, so there's an improvement in fatigue that has occurred from the extract, the consumption of the extract. If you look at the graph on the top right, the RIVP accuracy, what you see there is the extract product, which is labeled as delcyan, has improved the accuracy of those volunteers. And then if you look at the bottom left graph, that's a questionnaire measure of alertness and mood. There's an improvement in alertness for the extract. So to cut a story short, if you compare to the juice data, you actually see different elements of some of those things too. So there's quite a difference between the extract as well as the juice, which is of interest to us, and we still don't fully understand, I have to say. But blackcurrant is certainly having some effects. From an exercise perspective, we're interested in the effects of cognition on performance. Cognition is a massive part of physical performance, especially at a sort of an elite level or any level really. And we've done a lot of work, Marlena touched on it slightly, around muscle recovery. And so we're now interested in the parameters that are shown there in terms of cognition with exercise, such as motivation to train, such as spatial awareness, and I showed you a little bit of data, such as alertness and concentration, learning, and things that are important for gameplay and team play with sport and exercise. So here's a study that we've completed recently, and this is very preliminary data I'm going to show you. I emphasize that. Quite complex. What we were interested in here is we were looking at high-intensity training, and we wanted to know whether fruit consumption affected cognitive fitness or cognitive performance after the training. So after training and fatigue as part of that training, do we see an improvement in cognitive fitness? So with training, there probably is an element of improvement in cognition, but with fatigue, that's impaired, and can fruits have an impact there to speed that recovery? So the study design is quite complex, but I'll try and explain it. So week 1, we did physical tests, so tests of fitness, VO2 max, as well as some baseline cognitive testing, and really an assessment, a submaximal cycle to determine how motivated they were in terms of their wanting to cycle. Then they entered over those other weeks into a high-intensity training regime, which I can explain later. So there was a large training of element going through those 2 weeks, which was quite significant. And then at the end, at week 4, we again assessed their physical fitness and their cognitive ability. And that cognitive ability was tested after the physical fitness test. So when they were fatigued and we were looking at the recovery period. So here's that preliminary data. This is just one psychometric cognitive test. It's called the Digital Symbol Substitution Task. It's a higher executive thinking task. And it's sort of depicted, yes, I'm well over. It's depicted, it's gone 0. I'm surprised I'm still here. It's depicted on the right-hand side there. So volunteers see these images appear on the screen, the image in the square, a symbol, and very rapidly over time, 1 a second, that sort of thing, and they have to press the button that corresponds to that symbol as quickly and as accurately as they possibly can. So the 2 graphs show reaction time as well as accuracy, and what you can see there, if you just look at the placebo data, first of all, the training improved reaction time, but had no change on accuracy. Whereas if you look at the green bars, the fruit has no further improvement on reaction time, but it improves accuracy. So we're showing data that's starting to show that there are cognitive improvements of certain sorts with exercise and exercise fatigue. So I'll just finish there. It was very quick, and just allow you to look at my colleagues and the people that we collaborate. So thank you very much.